Well, I thought I was done giving feedback, but I managed to think of a few more things I'd like to see in the game, but they're very minor. And also there were some control configuration conflictions, and I overlooked those because I don't normally use those control configurations. And it's mostly to do with the dive or dodge abilities, if they brought those back. So I'll start with those first. Okay, so back in the first video I said I wanted to bring back the old dodge moves so that I could stay on my feet and not have to jump down to the ground to dodge a knife attack or jump back into cover, but I was thinking I could use the dive button to do this and also roll on the ground, but this won't work, and that's because there are two control configurations in Ground Zeroes that use the R2 button as the quick dive. So if you were to use the dodge moves while aiming, you wouldn't be able to do it because then you'd accidentally be dodging when you're trying to move and shoot. And you know, maybe the developers would have caught this anyway, but since I thought of it, I figured I'd mention it. That way they don't scratch the idea and say, oh, that won't work, we can't do that, forget that. So there's still a way to do it, and that is just bring back the same exact controls as Metal Gear 4. You just use the X button or crouch button while aiming and moving the left stick in whatever direction you want to go. You could still have the old dive and roll lay flat move as well by aiming and moving forward and holding the X button down until you lay flat. And of course this would apply to rolling on the ground sideways. You just use the same controls as the dodge and you wouldn't have to hold down the X button. When you try to use these controls on Ground Zeroes, all you do is squat up and down while aiming or lay down. And you know, I feel like it's not really that tactical, that useful, and I would much rather have the dodge abilities than this. So I don't think you're really giving up much. My original feedback that I already sent through Kojima Station was the old controls for dodging with the X or crouch button, but I changed it at the last minute when I made the first video because I thought it would be better to have all the dodge and diving and rolling and everything on one button. But since there were control configurations that conflicted with that, I didn't want to set any restrictions for anyone who might want to use those controls, and so diving will have to be on a separate button from the dodge abilities. And one more small thing I realized with the iDroid and binoculars is if you were using the L1, R1 buttons to shoot and L2 is your items button like it was in Metal Gear 4, then the controls for placing and removing markers on the binoculars would have to be moved to L1 instead of L2. And when you use the iDroid, you normally use the L2 and R2 buttons to navigate between different menu screens, but that would have to be moved to L1 and R1 since you use the L2 button to equip and unequip the item. And again, that's probably something the developers would have noticed and made the necessary changes to the controls if they plan on bringing back this type of control configuration, and I really hope they do. But the best part is it won't affect any existing control configurations. Something I've seen other people complain about, and I kind of agree with it, is that when you're in cover and you use your binoculars, it makes you pop out of cover. It would be nice if it didn't do that. It seems like Snake could make the same kind of movement that happens when you hold down the R3 button and just peek over, since sometimes when you try to use your binoculars, the object you're taking cover on blocks your view. I think that would fix the problem. Back in the first video when I mentioned underhand grenade throws are very important, and you have to get just the right angle to get over the wall to get to the enemy on the other side, and the sidearm throw throws it too far, and to compensate for that you throw the grenade lower. Well, I realized the other option is to back up farther from the wall to throw it and to tilt the camera up as high as it can go. But in a timing critical situation, you may not have the time or you may not have the space to back up so far. I just so happen to have enough room in this spot of the map in Ground Zeroes, but in a tighter situation the sidearm throw would not work because the enemy would have to be very far away from you, and if they're on the other side of the fence or wall you wouldn't be able to get to them. So I guess the point is bring back underhand throws and make it the same as they were in Metal Gear Solid 4. Something strange I noticed though when you throw a grenade and you stand next to a waist-high object is your grenade arc line automatically changes angles. I'm not sure why it does this, but it seems kind of weird. In Metal Gear 4, the aiming reticle and the grenade arc line match the color of the sky, but in Metal Gear 5, the only thing that matches the sky is the grenade arc line, and you could make it a different color, but I think the best thing to do is have a black outline around it, just like you see here on the aiming reticle, and this would make it so that no matter what color the sky or the background color, it would always show up. Back in the first video when I was talking about how Snake's body's not in the center of the screen, and when you switch shoulders it throws off your aim a little bit and you can't always rely on the enemy's head being in the center of the screen. Well, I realized that you can actually lock onto something if you're pointing right at it, but if you're next to it, it doesn't lock on. When you're right up next to something and aiming at it, you can see that Snake's gun moves a little bit when you move past it. I think what throws my aim off the most though is that you can switch shoulders without aiming first, and you couldn't do that in Metal Gear 4. So now that his body's not in the center of the screen, I guess I'll just have to deal with it. It seems kind of minor. In the last video, I mentioned how I like being able to see around the sniper rifle scope, but one thing that's not realistic is that everything around the scope is still in focus. So if it was done more realistically, like in Hitman Absolution, everything around the scope would be out of focus, but you'd still be able to detect movement. If there are buildings in the Phantom Pain or on MGO 3 where we can climb up pipes and along ledges of buildings like this, I'd like to be able to do it, like I said in the last video. But what I forgot to mention was the ability to shoot a gun while doing this. And of course throw grenades too. On top of that, if there are any pipes on the ceiling, I think that would be a really cool and useful ability to have in MGO 3 or Phantom Pain as well. And like always, be able to shoot and throw grenades. Another way to improve or enhance the cover system would be to have a transfer from cover to cover. This is done really well in Hitman, and this could be done by using the dive button after taking cover. The same thing would apply to moving past windows. In this video here you can see he's even using the square button to do that, and that is the dive button by default. And of course you could also shoot from this position as well. I think in this particular mission on Splinter Cell Blacklist you're actually in Afghanistan, and since you go there in the Phantom Pain and there are maps like that in MGO 3, it seems like there'd be some buildings that are designed similar to this so that we could grab ledges by climbing up, and then there's something else you could do on top of that, and that is a overhead CQC takedown move. I think this would be really useful. Something I almost forgot to mention, and I really want this, but I want to be able to use the options button to pause the game, or the right side of the touchpad and the left side to use my iDroid, or the call button if they bring back the classic controls, because all of my other PS4 games use the options button to pause the game. I recently found out on Twitter that holdups will not be in MGO 3, and that's really disappointing to me because that was one of my favorite things to do. And as you can see from Twitter, I'm not the only one that's not happy about this, and I think if it stays this way, people are going to request that it comes back long after the game comes out, so you might end up deciding to patch it in later on anyway. I just don't understand why holdups are being removed. I mean, are they seen as not fun? Because I don't see it that way, and a lot of the fans on Twitter don't see it that way. I mean, you're asking for feedback, they're telling you what they want, so why not give them what they want? At least in regards to the holdups. To me, there's just been way too many useful abilities that have been removed that used to be in Metal Gear 4, and I don't want to see Metal Gear 5 and MGO 3 held back by restrictions like that. You know, that was one of the best things about MGO 2 is the way it played, the amount of options you had, the customization of the skills, and that's what I think kept people coming back to MGO 2, because it was so addicting and had a lot to offer. People tried to quit and go to play other games, and then after a while they came back and they're like, yeah, this game's way more fun. It's been almost a month now since my first feedback video, and I was concerned back then if it was too late or not to give feedback, and now I wonder if I'm just wasting my time, but I figured it better late than never. I'd like to, you know, say thanks to anyone who's watched my video and agreed with everything or almost everything I said. So that's a good sign. That means a lot of people are just like me. They're hardcore MGO 2 fans. And the more of us that, you know, give feedback, the more likely this stuff is going to be put in the game. This should be my last feedback video because I can't think of anything else now. Even if I did, it's probably too late beyond this point. Or maybe it's already too late, but you don't know till you try. So like always, thanks for watching.